In this lecture, we're going to learn a little bit more about querying. We're going to do some advanced stuff with that, and we're going to be working with this score class here. So right now we have two objects in there. Let's say we wanted to grab more than just one person's score, like we wanted to grab everybody's score. How could we do that? Well, let's go ahead and move back to Android Studio. And we have got a lot of code here with all these different examples that we did. So I'm going to go ahead and clear that out so that we have a fresh start here to move forward. So how can we make it so that we grab all the score objects? Well, we are going to create a parse query. And with this, again, inside our angle brackets, we are looking for a parse object. So we'll do parse object, boom. So I'm just going to call this lowercase query. We're going to say this is equal to parse query dot get query, and again we are looking for the score class. Now this is where things take a turn. So before, when we said query dot and we wanted to do our find in background, so with this we were putting before, let's see here, let's make sure, yep, find in background, we were putting in first the ID of that particular object, and then we were doing the new find callback. But in this situation, we're not looking for a particular ID. We want everything. And so now we are just going to say new, and we're going to do capital find callback. And with this, we are going to type out here, if, we'll put in parentheses here, we just want to check and make sure we're actually got some objects. And I guess I should take a second to mention here, look at this. We are getting back a list of parse objects in this situation, right? It's not one singular object. So that's pretty important here. So we want to make sure that we didn't have any errors with this situation. So we're going to first check and see if E is equal to null. So if it's null, that means that we're probably safe to move forward. Next thing that we want to check and see is if there's actual objects inside of the objects list. So we're going to do another if statement. We're going to say if objects dot, and we want to get the size. We're going to say if this is greater than 0, then we're able to move forward and know, all right, we've got some objects and work with them. So if that is the case, then let's go ahead and do a for loop through these objects. So we're going to say for, and we just want to say capital parse object that we'll call a singular object. Notice no S. So we're going to have singular object colon objects with an S. So it's going to loop through, and each time it goes through a particular object, it will name it object. And then we can go ahead and get some information about it. So let's go ahead and just log out information about these score objects. So the first thing that we should probably get is the username. So we're going to say username here, and what we're going to do for the string is we need to get access to the object dot get string, and the key that we're going to pass in here is username because we want to get their username. Boom. And we'll do something similar for the score, although with the score it's an integer. We're going to have to do some conversion there, but we're going to say we're looking for the score. We want to get the score, but I guess, let's just retype this because we want to say get int for the score, and we're going to have to convert that. So we'll do our capital integer dot to string, and let's make sure we put object back in there, and then we'll have to add an additional parenthesis. So that should log out that information. Okay, so don't forget we need to have a semicolon down here to wrap up this new find in background. Oh, and we seem to have somehow lost an ending parenthesis here, so we'll go ahead and put that in, and that should make things happy. So if this works out, we should be able to log out the two users and their scores with this one particular query. So let's go ahead and run this. All right, have our emulator here, and then open up Logcat. All right, so it opens up, and look at that. We print out Nick 45, Sean 85. So it successfully went to parse and got each of the objects. So you see, we're not just getting one object by its particular ID. We're now listing through a bunch of objects and getting access to each of them. So now that you know how to do this, the next thing that we want to do is move forward and talk about how we can then search for a particular object. So, you know, maybe we're getting a list, but we only want to know people who name starts with this, or, you know, their scores are higher than this, something like that, right? So before we do the query, so we're going to type up here, we want to set some additional parameters. So you can say query.where, and you'll notice if you type where, there's all sorts of different options here. But the one that we're looking for is where equal to. And if we do this, we want to say, you know, we want to know where there's usernames. Let me make sure that it's lowercase username. You've got to spell that correctly. So where the lowercase username is equal to, and let's pick one of the users' names. So maybe let's go with Sean here. So we'll come back and we're going to say, give us all the people who have the name Sean. Then with that, we have to then specify here. You don't have to do this, but I think it's probably a good healthy thing is, you know, let's say there was multiple Seans. You might get back a bunch of Sean objects, which maybe that's what you want, but also you maybe want to limit it to only one Sean. So if you can say get limit is equal to 1, or excuse me, not get limit, we want to set the limit, and we might set that equal to 1 to say, hey, we only want to get one result back from that. We still need to loop through because we're still getting a list, but that kind of says, hey, we only want 1. And it doesn't have to be 1. Let's maybe, you know, if we wanted 5 Sean objects, we could have put a, you know, an option of 5, but it's really up to you about how you handle that. So go ahead and hit run. Let's make sure we're getting the correct information here. And let's go ahead and open up Logcat. And if we scroll, look at that. We get Sean, 85, and Nick is nowhere to be seen. Okay, so that's great. Now I have a challenge for you, and the challenge is as follows. So let's go ahead, clear all this out. We want to start fresh here. The challenge for you is I want you to make it so that you go through all of these score objects and say, hey, as long as someone has a score higher than 50, I want you to give them an additional 20 points. So you can see one person is above, one is not above 50. So if the user is above 50 points, I want you to add 20 to their score. Okay, go ahead and hit pause, do that now. All right, so hopefully that went well for you. Again, wanted you to go through all the score objects, find people who have a score greater than 50, add 20 to it. So we are going to make a parse query, just like we did before. We're looking for parse objects, and we'll just go ahead and call this query. It is going to be equal to, not new, and we just want to say parse query dot get query, and we are looking for score objects. Okay. Then we have to specify the query that, you know, hey, we only want scores that are greater than 50. So remember when I said with these wheres, there's all sorts of options. So we are going to search for where greater than, and, you know, I hadn't particularly taught you this. So this was where, you know, hopefully you found this via Google or just trying things out on your own. But we're going to say where greater than, and we're going to specify first the key of score and then the value of 50. So we're saying where the score is greater than 50. So now that we have that sort of parameter in place saying, you know, we only want those people, we can now take our query and do a find in background. Okay, and with this find in background, we want to do a new find callback just like this. So this gives us back the list. Let's go ahead and do a combined if statement here for checking for E being equal to null, and also we'll go ahead and we'll do the amperstamps here to say, and let's make sure that objects is not equal to null. So if that's the case, then we know we can safely do a for loop through these objects. So we're going to say for, and we'll just make a parse object that we'll call object. I mean, you could, if you wanted to, be a little more specific here, and you could say this is a score. I might just do that for fun so that, you know, you can see that there's nothing special about that name object, and in this case it might make it easier to read. So with this, let's go ahead and, add additional points to the score. So we're going to take the score object dot put, and the key that we're trying to update is score. And remember, we want to add 20 to their score. So we need to take the existing score and add 20 to it. So in order to get that existing score, we're going to take our score object dot get int for the score key. We're going to take that and add 20 onto it. So we're taking what's already there, adding 20 onto it, and putting that in this new score object. Then we're going to say score dot save in background. Boom, that is the code we need. So let's go ahead and run this, make sure that it works correctly. We have talk the talk. Let's make sure we can walk the walk. So we'll wait for the app to open up there. It looks like it's done its stuff. We didn't log anything, so we won't see anything here in Logcat. But if we go up here, we should see that Sean, who has a score greater than 50, should bump up to 105. But Nick, who has a score less than 50, nothing should happen to him. So we'll go ahead and reload here. Boom! Look at that. Because he had a score greater than 50, he updated with 20 points. So now you know how to update that. Now, in the next lecture, we're going to be talking about the user. This is something we want to make sure we really grasp and understand before we move on to making that Instagram app. So let's go ahead and dive into that now.